Welcome to Liberal Banter with Liz and Olu. Today we are talking about Biden and the youth vote and some of what we've seen on social media regarding the upcoming election and young voters. We also want to talk about some of the Supreme Court decisions this week, especially around Mifepristone and bump stocks. And finally, we have some unsolicited advice for Republicans in Texas who are still entertaining ideas about removing themselves from the United States and becoming an independent nation. So first topic, the youth vote and Biden. Over the last couple of days, a couple of publications, specifically the Washington Post and New York Times, both independently published articles discussing how Biden is doing with young voters. Both of these articles chose to focus on Biden's lack of connection with certain influencers on platforms like TikTok, people who in 2020 endorsed Biden, encouraged their followers to vote for Biden, and then during this election seem to have moved away from him, seem to be expressing disappointment in how he's done over the last few years as president, and expressed their disapproval of how he's handling major issues like the war in Gaza, and share that that's the reason why they either won't be voting for him, won't be endorsing him. You know, some of them said they're going to vote third party, like Jill Stein, which was terrifying because we all know what happened in 2016 with Jill Stein in the election. So to hear her come up again, she is running. She is. She is. So I'm scared. I'm very scared, and that's why we're talking about this week.
Okay. So, I mean, as you said, the New York Times article sort of focused on young people on social media, which I just don't think that's a representative sample. Not to say that there isn't, a real disaffection amongst like young voters, but I just find the people that the articles chose to talk about they're just influencers and clout chasers to me. I'm not sure that they represent the actual youth vote.
Well, that's true. And I think that was pointed out by a lot of people. You know, these journalists, one of the people we're talking about is Taylor Lorenz, who is a pretty well-known online, especially if you follow like tech news. She's a journalist. She has been for a few years, and she covers social media and the internet. That's really her beat. And so she does a lot of hanging out online, talking to a lot of young people. And so she wrote the Washington Post article that some people were referencing. What was interesting to me was the comments when she posted about the article on Threads, and some of the comments she received when she published this were from people who claim to be Gen Z, agreeing with the take that they are not going to be supporting Biden. I don't know how big of a problem this is really, but I have also seen this online enough to where I think it warrants a discussion. One of the comments she had on her thread where she posted about this was from a young person who said that he and other people like him other Gen Zers or Zoomers, despite being on the left, are not planning to vote for Biden. Some of them are not planning to vote for Biden in the presidential race, but will vote for Democrats down ballot, which I guess thank you. And some people planning to vote for Jill Stein. What do you think about this strategy that seems to be the case where people are just fed up with Biden, but at least hopefully they won't give the House and the Senate to the Republicans?
Well, I mean, I know that that's one of the things that you are asking people to do. You're like, okay, if you're not going to vote for Biden, at least make sure you vote like
yes, yes, so, please.
But this is the thing, right? I think the traditional thinking is that the presidential turnout bleeds into the congressional vote turnout. So, like, if you don't have people turning up for the Democratic president, it's going to hurt the Democratic Congress seats. And then the other thing is, most people don't know who their Congress members are, or who is running for Congress. A lot of people know who is running for president on some level. So again, I feel like this sample is already like a hyper sort of engaged, hyper educated people who already know what congressional seats are coming up and who to vote for. I just don't think that this represents everyone.
I mean, I don't think it represents everyone either, but I do think it represents a problem. If these are, especially in the Washington Post article, these were people who specifically in 2020 voted and endorsed and asked people to vote for Joe Biden. These influencers have only grown more popular since then. They've widened their audiences since then. And now, 4 years later, they seem to be just kind of mid on the whole idea of voting for Joe Biden. I think that is concerning. How much they speak for the entire generation, I don't know. I mean, we need more polling, right? There's a lot of polling out there that suggests all types of things, but I don't think anyone has really checked in as much with young people leading towards this election. But I do think we need to dig into this. I think this is a concern. I think this is something the Biden campaign should be worried about. I don't know how much of it is going to be a real problem, though. I just think it's enough to be discussed, looked into, whatever you want to call it. I will say, though, that the young people who I have seen online, and I think we talked about one of them this week, who appears to be a single issue voter. Her issue is Gaza and what's happening in the Middle East. And because of that, she's suggesting people vote third party. This is an influencer who has quite a bit of reach online. She suggested people vote third party. And I've begun to see more people, and this might be the algorithm, but I've begun to see more people suggesting to vote for people like Jill Stein as an alternative. My suggestion was that they vote at least down ballot for Democrats. But if they decide to vote third party for the presidential election, we may end up in a not great situation where the Democrats don't win the White House, but they keep the Senate and maybe get the House back.
Okay, so these are like third party curious people, I guess.
That's a great way to describe them. Yes, exactly.
Well, okay. I mean, if that's what these folks should want to do, more power to them. I'm just not sure. Like, trying to reach young people, I'm not sure that TikTok is the best way to do it, or Instagram is the best way to do it. But apparently, 1/3 of young people get their news from TikTok. So maybe this is a good place for the Biden administration to spend their time. But one of the examples you sent me, this young lady who you're saying is talking about Palestine, I just want to ask them, like, so what is the end game here? Because you know that a third party candidate can't win. And you know that voting for the third party candidate means that you're taking out a Democratic vote, which could end up benefiting Trump. So what is the plan if your preferred third candidate doesn't win, which is a very, very big likelihood, and if Joe Biden doesn't win?
Well, the plan is a Trump presidency, isn't it? I mean, that's the outcome. It's not I don't know if it's a plan, but that's the outcome that we'll get. I hope they know that a third party candidate cannot win this election. It's the last time a third party candidate even got close to just 20% of the vote was 1992. It's 32 years ago. So I think they all know that they're not, this is not going to be someone who wins like Jill Stein is not winning the election. But it sounds like their logic is this is a good way to show Democrats how we feel, that they're not listening to us, that they're not progressive enough. And I am concerned that enough people will pick up this narrative that is what will happen, that the Democrats lose the White House because of these young people who are pushing this idea. I've watched quite a few of these videos, and it feels like there's a sense of just let it all burn, you know. You're telling us Trump is a fascist and he's going to turn America into the Third Reich, but we don't care because we'll teach the Democrats a lesson as a result, which is a very negative and disturbing way to look at politics. I mean, I don't think if you're 19, 20 years old, you should feel this way. But there are some people who are really just disappointed, disaffected out there, and they just want to see everything, you know, blown up, and let's start from scratch.
Right.
It's kind of close to some of the MAGA people, actually, if you think about it. It's a little bit of that too.
Exactly. It seems like a kind of destructive impulse. Feels very reminiscent of the same thing that was done with Hillary Clinton, where young people decided to, you know, point out all of the problems with Hillary Clinton, valid or invalid. And then we're like, well, what's the worst that could happen with Trump? And then we saw the worst that could happen with Trump. And that was only 4 years ago. So I don't understand what this amnesia is about in terms of, you know, like, this is like throwing stones inside of a glass house. I don't follow this logic, because whatever it is to me that you care about, I just don't see how it gets better under Trump. Because if it's Palestine, like, Trump is just going to let Bibi Netanyahu do even more, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, I am not here to defend the Biden's administration's approach to what the Israeli government has done. But what I do understand is that only Trump is the one who handed over Jerusalem as a to Israel. Like, setting some of these things in motion, right? So whatever lip service that you think Joe Biden is paying, you're not even going to get that. And then Trump is gonna tear gas y'all. Like, what are you doing? Like, if you go and protest against him, he is going to have them shoot you down. I don't understand, like, where are we going with this?
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, and I appreciate that you're being measured about it, because the other part of this discussion online is people who support Biden are, some of them, not all of them, but a lot of people support Biden. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I want to be very careful about my words here, because I don't want to paint every liberal Biden voter with this brush. It's not a lot. It's the things I have seen online. Let's clarify. The people I have seen online who are, let's say, millennials or older or younger, Gen X or whatever, who are responding to all this news about Gen Z having issues with Biden. Some of the Biden supporters I've seen online are so negative when having this discussion with Gen Z or millennials that don't necessarily agree with Biden. Like, I appreciate how measured you're being, because I saw someone who said, who called Gen Z morons and fools, who have called them immature children, who have said, you know, they're going to lose their civil rights if Trump is president. And threatening these people who are concerned about Biden's stance on whatever issue has not been successful. I'm actually worried that the left is having this sort of existential crisis that's simmering underneath, with the more progressive people and the more moderate people yelling at each other and forgetting that we all have to be on the same side to deal with people like Trump. So I appreciate a measured discussion, and I don't think it's unrealistic to say Biden has not been perfect. I think that's that goes without saying. Even if you're the most solid Biden supporter, you have to admit he has done things that have alienated groups of people on the left. But I still think we can all agree, I hope we can all agree, that he is better than the alternative. I know that's not a rousing campaign statement. It's not exciting, but it is a fact that he is a better person to negotiate with than Trump.
Exactly. I don't think that it's helpful to dismiss people because then they just shut down and they don't listen to you. But let's be real, Joe Biden was never the transformative president anyways, right? Nobody
No,
voted for
no.
Joe Biden in 2020 because he was just that inspiring and just expected to be such a change maker, right?
Yeah.
The argument for Joe Biden has always been those MAGA people are crazy. We need less craziness in general. And for me, in spite of all of it, that still holds true today, right? So
Yep.
if you're a young person who voted for Joe Biden in 2020, I don't see how he's that much different now. He was never a rock star. He's not meant to be. He's always been just that doddering old man who drops 1,000-ton bombs on places in the Middle East. That's what he's always been throughout his Senate years and vice presidency under Obama, where they were just droning everywhere. So I don't understand what is particularly different now.
Well, they will say, he hadn't banned TikTok or threatened to ban TikTok. That's definitely something I've heard. And not for the fun social media reason, but people have built small businesses based on TikTok, and they're very worried about what's going to happen if this ban goes into place, later. And there's things the which I find fascinating, because I know you have a big problem with this, but people talking about the climate, how he hasn't done enough on climate, which, he did pass a huge change to how pushing EVs and developing green tech. That was a big part of the Biden campaign, and that he has actually started to deliver on. So when I hear climate, I'm just like, okay, I mean, that's not true, but cool. I want to know if anyone has suggestions on how to interact with these. I don't want to call them kids. We're not that old. But you know what I mean? I want to have a conversation with them. I don't want what happened in 2016 to happen again. I don't want people voting for Jill Stein.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my concern. Let's win this election and then let's figure it out later. But I don't want to alienate them. I don't want to alienate them the way the Bernie bros, I think, felt alienated in 2016, right? Let's have a conversation. We agree. We are close to the same side on a lot of things. Let's talk. Let's not alienate each other. Let's not yell at each other. Let's not call each other morons online. I don't think that's helpful to the conversation. Let's find out what the youth want. Let's find out what they want. Let's talk to them about it.
Well, I mean, let's hope the Biden administration finds a way to communicate this to them, right? I mean, at the end of the day, as you've always pointed out, it's always the politician's job to make sure that the messaging is right and the communication is clear.
Yep.
I mean, as you have mentioned, he's passed sweeping changes on climate change, and for some reason, that message is just not getting out to the people who claim to care the most about climate, which is young people. And on one hand, is is it the Biden administration who is not communicating this, or are the young people who claim to care about climate, are they just not informed? They're not doing their best to be informed.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that's I think a good place to end it. Is like the campaign needs to deliver the message. I don't know if they're doing that because I don't think anyone who is paying attention would be able to confidently say both sides are the same, which is something I see a lot. That is wild to me. You can't see these two candidates, these two presidencies as the same if you truly understand their policy and where they stand on certain issues. They are not the same. They are wildly different. And I can't believe anyone who's paying attention would say that. But let's leave that topic for now. I'm sure it will come up again. You know, election is in November, so we have months and months more of polling ahead, I'm sure. But let's talk about the Supreme Court this week, which came out with a couple of important decisions. You know, speaking of things that the presidency impacts, right? Because we have the Supreme Court because Trump was president for 4 years.
I mean, they decided to, stop focusing on their gone wild wives and just like do some actual.
Yes, they did their job, sort of.
So, I mean, we may have thought that the Supreme Court was just about, RVs, fancy vacations, and crazy flag ladies, but apparently they actually do give rulings once in a while. And the first one this week was about the drug Mifepristone, which can be used as part of medical abortion in conjunction with another drug called misoprostol. But what I find really fascinating about this case that the Supreme Court ruled on about Mifepristone is that it was brought by a group of doctors called the Hippocratic Alliance for Medicine, and some pro-life OBGYN groups, just a few doctors, not the big doctor groups, who said that mifepristone should be banned because it harms them morally. So their standing that they were claiming was that because they as doctors have to see women and people who have used mifepristone later and treat them for complications from mifepristone or just treat them from anything standing from their abortion anyways, that makes them complicit in their abortion. And so just mifepristone should be banned for everybody, which is just an insane argument to me.
So, sorry, so let me understand. So they're doctors, but they're saying they don't want to do their jobs, i.e. taking care of a patient, if that patient has used one of these drugs to have an abortion. And that's what they took it to the Supreme Court because they're morally opposed to treating these people.
Exactly. They're not even claiming that they have to provide abortions. Wow. They're not claiming that they have to provide abortion drugs. They're claiming that by virtue of them just being in the healthcare field, they have to run across people who've used mifepristone. And that is too much for them to bear because still having to treat those folks makes them complicit in abortion in some way. And that was the basic premise of their argument. And then the Supreme Court ruled that, while they may have moral objections to mifepristone, they still don't have standing here because they haven't been able to show how it directly affects them, right? Like, how does this still affect you? I mean, I don't agree with, this kinds of limitations, but as far as I know, you cannot force a doctor to perform an abortion. So
true.
Opt out of performing an abortion, but you don't get to say that I don't want to treat someone if I know that they've already had an abortion. That's insane. That's like saying I don't want to treat someone if I know that they've used drugs in the past, or I don't want to treat someone if I know that, they have alcoholism. There are all sorts of things that people object to morally. And if you start allowing doctors to say, oh, I don't think that is a worthy patient, so I don't want to treat them, then it's just a breakdown in the delivery of care.
When you explain this argument, that explains why even this Supreme Court had to vote 9-0 on this. Like, not a single judge was convinced by this. And I applaud them for it, even though I'm sure this will be the last time I applaud this Supreme Court this year, because they have a bunch of other rulings coming that I'm sure won't go the way we want. But I applaud them for this one because the argument you described is insane. I thought doctors took an oath to treat people. How are they able to do just randomly? And then to take this to the Supreme Court, I mean, honestly, the balls, right? How can you make this argument in like a bar? And I don't mean like a legal bar. I mean like a bar where drinks are being served. If you made this argument in a bar, people would boo you out of the room. How do you take this all the way to the Supreme Court as a doctor or a medical person to say you don't want to treat people because you're morally opposed to past decisions they made?
But this is just saying, it's a sign of the overconfidence they have. They have planned this for decades, and they have made sure to pad the Supreme Court with anti-abortion. So they fully expected that they should go the way. I mean, even the fact that the Supreme Court chose to hear this in the first place is a problem. Because, again, federal law already protects doctors. You don't have to perform an abortion if you don't want to. So, like, this should have just been, like, not even heard at all. There's no problem here. You don't get to punish others for decisions after the fact. Like, that's just doesn't make any sense.
They did make the decision 9-0, so thank God logic prevailed in that situation, or thank goodness logic prevailed in that situation. Let's go to a decision where logic did not prevail, which was the bump stocks for guns. Now, when this story broke, some of the coverage I saw online and on TV was about the last time bump stocks came up in the sort of public conscious and public discussion was after the Las Vegas mass shooting, because these additions to guns are what allowed that shooter to fire off 100 rounds a minute. Yep. And that was the worst mass shooting in U.S. history. It was at a concert in Vegas, and it was horrible when it happened. And it happened in October 2017. I think it was around 58, 60 people were killed. When it happened, it was so bad that a Republican president put the bump stock ban in place. That is how bad this shooting was. For people who maybe don't live in the U.S. and are not familiar, this was a horrible, horrible mass shooting at a concert where a man fired off hundreds of rounds. I think over 1,000 rounds of ammunition were fired because of bump stocks, which allowed him to basically turn a regular rifle into an automatic rifle, a weapon of war. And because of how horrible this was, the bump stock ban was introduced, and bump stocks were banned at a federal level in the U.S. This Supreme Court this week just removed that ban. So now in the 36 states where bump stocks were previously allowed before the ban, they are back able to be sold. What was the logic here by the Supreme Court? I mean, this seems like a huge mistake. I don't know how they justified voting for it. All 6 conservative judges voted to remove this ban and allow this tool back on the streets. So now these gun attachments can be added back in the 36 states where they're now legal again.
The question, again, is why did the Supreme Court even entertain this case, right? The ATF is already the regulatory body for guns. The executive branch is already regulating guns. is there anything that the Supreme Court doesn't consider to be like its area of expertise? Because what they're saying is that bomb stocks aren't actually assault weapons, so they shouldn't be banned. But the justices, are you gun experts? Are you the ATF? Like, how do you get to say that a bump stock is not an illegal machine gun because it doesn't make the weapon fire more than one shot with a single pull of the trigger, which is literally their argument? Are you gun experts? Are you the ATF? Like,
No.
I don't understand.
I don't understand either. And to me, this seems like such a no-brainer issue. Maybe I'm just not, I'm not a conservative justice on the Supreme Court, so what do I know? But it seems like the court, this issue was more around, you know, like very specific definitions of what is a machine gun versus something that converts a weapon into a machine gun, and does a bump stock actually do that? I don't know anything about these discussions. I don't know anything about machine guns. I'm not a military person. I'm not the ATF. But the argument that was put in front of the justice made sense to me about why these bump stocks are meeting the definition of converting a weapon into a machine gun. Somehow, though, that wasn't enough to convince these justices. And so 6-3 bump stocks are back on the table. And I am actually concerned because my first thought when I heard about this was, we have a very polarized electorate and a group of people who love guns on one side who may be disappointed in November with the outcome of the election and now have the option to turn their already existing guns into even worse weapons thanks to the Supreme Court. These are the kinds of thoughts that run through my head because we live in the US. There's always a risk of something happening. And now there's another tool out there on the market to make that an even worse scenario if there's ever another mass shooting. It's just, from a legal perspective, I don't understand. From a logical perspective, I don't understand. And from a public safety perspective, I don't understand why the Supreme Court did this.
Exactly. As you have said, why do they feel like they have the expertise to do this? Because then they said that like it has to be regulated by Congress. So why did you listen to the case? Why did you even like table the case or entertain the case? Right? Because the question here, what is the point of the law if all you want to do is semantic reading of the law and not actually protect people, right? Because this literal translation of, well, it has to fire more rounds in one single click of the trigger. Okay. Well, why can't you just extend that to it has to kill less than, one person per hour, right? Like, where is the end of this logic for you to determine whether something is a dangerous weapon or not? It doesn't make any sense to me. And as you have said, we are putting ourselves in jeopardy every day the more we relax these guns. It's everywhere. It's churches. It's freaking grocery stores. It's movie theaters. You can't even get into a parking lot fight with someone without like them blowing your head off over it. We're living in an insane society where we're giving everyone guns. And then it's not enough that we're giving them guns, we're then giving them ways to supercharge and super enhance the guns.
Yeah, I don't get it either. And, we applauded the Supreme Court for the first decision around Mifepristone, and we're back yelling at them again. And for those who are curious, and not necessarily to tie this back to the previous topic, but like we said at the beginning, this is why elections matter. These justices on the court, the 6 justices that voted to remove the ban on bump stocks, 3 of them were appointed by Trump. And that's why there's a conservative majority on the court, because Trump was president for 4 years and he got to replace 3 justices with people he wanted, and here we are. And they all basically vote the same along party lines, even though the Supreme Court is supposed to be, neutral or apolitical. But this is why elections matter. And if you're thinking about 2024, there may be other openings on the court in the coming 4 years. Who do you want filling those spaces? It's a good question to ask yourself if you're not sure who you want to vote for. Just a thought.
Exactly. And if there's anyone listening who is saying, well, it's just this one election, I can afford to protest this one or throw this away. The way the court is now came from decades of planning by conservative groups and the Federalist Society, literally plotting to get this current majority that they have. So if you think that one election cycle doesn't matter, think again.
Yep. Okay, and then our last topic for today is our segment we call Unsolicited Advice. This week, our unsolicited advice is for Republicans in Texas. Now, for people who are not in the U.S., who may not be paying attention to U.S. politics as much, or even Americans who don't pay attention to politics as much, there have been rumblings for years that Texas needs to become an independent nation, separate itself from the United States, become its own country. And some Texans support this. They're tired of America, the country. They're tired of all the freedom and liberty they enjoy as Americans. And they want their own country because Texas is special. Texas is awesome. Texas has a decent economy. And so they feel like they can stand on their own. And so this week, the GOP in Texas released their platform document at the state level. I want to reiterate, this is the Texas GOP, not the national GOP. The Texas GOP platform document was released, and in it, they expressed support for a vote on whether Texas should become an independent nation, meaning basically that the GOP in Texas is backing Texas seceding from the Union. My unsolicited advice for them is don't do it. I don't know how realistic this is. We're calling it Texit, like Brexit, but Texas. Don't do Texit, guys. Personally, having visited Texas and lived in Texas for a little bit, I get why people there feel like they're such an independent, strong place. They can totally do it on their own. But there's a joke online that if Texas secedes, Mexico will annex it right away, as the Lord intended. I don't know if that's what they want. But on a serious note, I will say I don't think it's a good idea to secede. I mean, think about it. You guys don't even have your own grid, right? Like, if you leave, how will you get electricity? All the funding you get when there's a natural disaster, where's that going to come from? I don't think it's a good idea. So my unsolicited advice this week is don't do it, Texas. Stay with us. Let's work on this relationship together.
Okay. Well, whoever, if they want to secede, please let them secede.
Why are you such a hater? Why are you such a hater? Just think
how with them on the way.
How will we? Oh, you want Texas and Florida to leave? I'm actually okay with Florida. See, this is the thing. I would be okay with Florida leaving. No offense to Florida, but if they want to leave, I'm fine with that. I think Texas should stay. I mean, it's a great state. It's just their politics needs an exorcism. That's really what's happening. But the people there are really cool. So don't leave, guys. Stay with us.
All right, that's all from us for this week. Please join us next week as we talk some more about this election cycle and how to make better choices, hopefully, in 2024. Bye for now.